When an unknown terrorist attack begins to fall upon the world and all heroes are blamed, a war and recognition between heroes must start, deciding who's right and who's wrong for the factor of what is supposed to be a true hero, someone who resigns or someone who obeys the law, which will end out in one of the biggest wars that superhero kind has ever come to know. In Marvel 2016 cinematic blockbuster Captain America Civil War, or Captain America 3. Hello and welcome to Lazy Cinema. I'm your host, Lazy Universe, and on this installment, we're going to talk about Captain America Civil War. And in all honesty, this is one of the worst Marvel movies I've ever seen. I know that people talk about that this is one of the best movies that they've seen, and a lot of people regard it as one of the blockbusters of 2016. But in 2016, hold on, there we go. But in 2016, we had a lot of movies that came out around this time: Suicide Squad, Batman vs Superman, Marvel's Civil War. A lot of films were released at this time, and this is one of the examples of one of the worst. People say that this is better than Batman vs Superman, and it is, but however, compared to something like Suicide Squad, it fails miserably in comparison. This film begins with a war going on between nations, it seems, and sadly, who is to blame are the superheroes, and the reason behind this is because of an accident caused by Wanda, aka the Scarlet Witch. And when she does this in a covert operation, General Ross wants the entire team of superheroes or nation of superheroes to stand down and consider what it means to be a hero, to follow the law or to disobey it. Now, everyone in this film is superb in acting, especially since it was the first appearance of Chadwick Boseman, who would go on to become the Black Panther, and of course Tom Holland, the Spiderman that he is today, especially going onward and as well as what is going to be the Uncharted films. And of course, considering in sorry, I had something to attend to. But Tom Holland going to the Uncharted films, and especially having the blockbuster, especially growing in franchise right now, which is Spider-Man No Way Home, honestly really compared to what they will become and what happened here. And especially why I think that this is one of the worst Marvel films I've ever seen is that for the actors, they do a very good job, especially Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr., who really do a superb job, especially Downey. Downey really shows off what he can do as Iron Man. He really kind of feels like Iron Man, but then he disillusionates away from Iron Man, and quite a lot in my opinion. It was funny how in the beginning they had him in makeup where he looked like he was his teenage self again. It looked like that he was back in the role of in Back to School or even Johnny Be Good compared to where he is now, and I thought that was a great achievement. But compared for Downey, what he is doing in the film is not really being Tony Stark, is or Iron Man in a sense. He's more acting like Robert Downey Jr. in a way, and that really takes me out of the film because you're looking at a guy who's supposed to be this great inventor. He's supposed to be this world's biggest entrepreneur, but he feels more like he's not supposed to belong. And they try to give him a sob story included in at last minute that involves his parents and the Winter Soldier. Why? Now, including that also that Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye, who is a big name actor for himself now this year, especially with the Mayor of Kingston, he deals he is not included in the film, and especially even made more so that they try to have him fight against Vision and then later on put in the Raft prison, which is a super prison for super criminals, is not what I thought was going to happen either. And now I will say that Jeremy Renner is a good actor, but especially since he was included so late in the film and having some phenomenal fight scenes, there really wasn't any inclusion to have him in this film. And speaking of which, they talked about Thor and Hulk. Now, by this point, Thor had went back to Ragnarok, including in comic form, yes. But Tony should have known what happened to Hulk, because in the pages of Marvel's Illuminati, Hulk was supposed to be launched on Scar, the planet where Planet Hulk starts off, and then when he comes back, it becomes World War Hulk, which did not ever happen, sadly to say, but that's what is supposed to happen, and especially having him in Ragnarok, which I heard was a much better and more decent film, and even not having Thor, not even in cameo for either of them, really feels like that they've been left out of the film. I will say I love the performances of both Holland and Chadwick Boseman. They are phenomenal actors, and especially in this, they really have a chemistry on screen. But what also feels really bad is that Boseman is on screen, off screen, on screen, and off screen again. And it felt very weird because this is a character who has his own phenomenal blockbuster that came out 2 years later, and we really wanted to see Black Panther on screen. A lot of people were very happy when the trailers announced this, and yet he's not in the film, and also given a very stupidity reason, especially having his father killed by not the person who killed his father, who is supposed to be Ulysses Claw. And I know that I'm a nerd about these things, but I expect something better to happen, especially in this film. Now, Holland, of course, phenomenal actor in his own regards. And for the other actors, they do feel like they belong, and what's sad is that the story, the written dialogue, is probably what ruins it most, is that we should be caring for these heroes, and I do, but there are so many points where they're just on screen, doing nothing and adding nothing into the story at all. Especially the main villain of the story, Baron Zemo. There is no reason why Baron Zemo should be in this film, except for setting up Falcon and Winter Soldier that came out in 2020. And aside from that, especially setting up Black Panther's movie, Tom Holland's movies, and a lot of other series like WandaVision, there is no reason for Zemo to be in this except to be twirling his evil mustache and going, I am the evilest bastard of them all. But there really is no reason for him to be in here. A lot of the fight scenes and choreography are quite decent if I can look at them. The camera movement makes me so nauseous, and for a guy with motion sickness, that does kind of seem very difficult to do. But I do admit the fight scenes are very well decent and well choreographed, especially the big fight scene that everybody talks about with the airport. Definitely a worthy fight scene, but where the fight scenes go afterwards, especially with the wild camera movement of everything going on, what am I supposed to be focusing on? And especially that this was one of the first films directed by the Russo brothers. And this is a bad example of a really good, what was supposed to be a decent movie. Civil War was not supposed to be about Baron Zemo in the background and him being the evil mastermind behind it all. It's supposed to be about heroes wanting to retire, want what's best for the world, especially after a freaking sad incident that happens. And what ended up happening was that we had Zemo behind it, and then we had to throw in at last minute a reason to have Tony Stark be Batman of all people, in a sense, and then we just leave him for dead, and then him and Tony Stark end up coming back together in the later Avengers films. This feels like a very rushed film. Did they not have enough time on their hands? Did they not have enough resources? Were there not enough people that were worthy to be involved in this film? I'm wondering, because this was supposed to be a great film, and sadly, it's handled poorly in the screenwriting, and especially the story. When even Disney's Incredibles handled this better, and hell, even some video games handled this concept better, it's really kind of odd for me to see that this was a movie that people were claiming best film of 2016, and it really showed in sales that it was. But for me, this was something I couldn't enjoy and was most of the time very bored with, especially trying to keep on track on what is happening, but being ended up so bored. I will give it this, that it does have one of the really most unique romances between both Tony Stark and Iron Man, and especially Vision and Scarlet Witch. I really felt the friendship between Tony and Steve really rippling and starting to crumble apart. And that's what's really good about the performances of both Chris Evans and Downey Jr. And when it comes to Vision and Scarlet Witch, it reminds me of the couple I used to see in the pages of a comic book. Very iconic and very endearing of a couple, especially Vision really caring about Wanda and not wanting to see her, dead or anything like that. But that, sadly, afterwards is where it comes apart in execution. And especially having both Tony gay for Rhodey and Cap gay for Bucky was really not what I wanted to see. Especially Tony having some of the worst one-liners ever. Now, I do love the relationship that Captain America was trying to give to Spider-Man, especially in the comics. They have a great friendship with one another, and it really showed here. And what's sad about it is that it's kind of put off in execution in a way. But I really did love how Tony and Peter had a great relationship, because in the comics, Peter looks at Tony as a father figure, and that's very well apparent in the Tom Holland Spider-Man films. It's very made well, very clear, especially also in the Avengers movies, that it's made very clear that Holland knows what he's doing. But yet, sadly, I really think this film is one of the worst that I've ever seen, sadly. And if you guys like it, I'm all for you. And you're free to like what you like. But don't come at me and saying that I don't get it or I don't understand the story. I really tried. I really tried. But when you don't give me something perfect in execution, it really falls flat, and I really have to put, sadly, Captain America Civil War on my worst of list. It had a good story, it's just yet put badly in execution, especially adding in so many other plot points that eventually went nowhere, and especially ruining some of the characters that other directors would later on fix in their own solo films. So this is one of the worst Marvel films I've ever seen, but if you liked it, more power to you. And I don't know why they made Rhodey a paraplegic. Maybe this was supposed to be some sort of payoff. But as far as I'm concerned, in comics, I've never seen Rhodey become a paraplegic. Ever. So, yeah. They could have just called this film Civil War and maybe people would have understood it better. But comparing to the cast that this had and the superheroes they had available in their hands, this is seriously one of the most compelling Marvel movies I've ever seen, and especially compared to what I've heard about Infinity War, Endgame, and more recently Spider-Man No Way Home. This is the worst type of execution for a huge crossover film. When the other films do it better for years later, and this was the footing ground, we probably should have waited. Would I say consider Batman vs. Superman compared to this? Hell no. Would I take Suicide Squad over this? Because they did the story better? Hell yes. And I'm sad to say that some of my favorite superheroes were destroyed upon this movie, including Black Panther, where the spotlight went mostly to Spider-Man, which is okay, but very sad in considering. So, tell me what you thought about Captain America Civil War. Did you like it? Did you hate it? And let me know in the comment section down below. Again, if you like it, more power to you, but please don't go on a rant or a tangent and call me out for these things. If you guys would like to start your own Civil War, you can do so by liking this video and subscribing to the channel as well. And please do not go against each other and start fighting in an airport somewhere just because of what I said over this video. I really don't need to see that happen. So thank you guys so much for watching, and next up we're going to try to join Benedict Cumberbatch in this realms of Doctor Strange, and hopefully that, from what I've seen from him in No Way Home, I'm hoping that it will be a much better film in execution compared to what Civil War did. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on the next Lazy Cinema.